There's one thing that potentially could save marriages besides the absolute merciful love of Christ Jesus our Lord. It would be this. Now, I've said this from long ago when I was studying marriage and family in grad school, and I've said this from that very moment that this is the thing that could really save marriages, and that is true leisure. Now, leisure is one of those things that is really misunderstood in our culture today. The world will kind of tell us this idea, this definition of leisure as just void of everything. In fact, if you look at Wikipedia, Wikipedia says leisure has often been defined as a quality of experience or as free time. Free time is time spent away from business, work, job hunting, domestic chores, and education, as well as necessary activities such as sleeping and eating. Leisure is an experience usually emphasizes dimensions of perceived freedom of choice. Freedom and choice. Now, this is the popular definition, and if you've ever thought about leisure, maybe this is the definition that you've thought of. You are planning a very leisurely day. Maybe you only think of that when you're on vacation, right? When you're away from work, when you have space in your life because it's stripped down, because it's void of what's normally there. Now, this is a definition, but it's not of leisure. This definition is more so of vacation. If you think of the word vacation, it's vacating your normal life to do something else. That's more what this definition is describing. You're taking away everything that might stress you out, every responsibility you have, everything that might bring you life. You're stripping that away in an effort to have this perceived freedom and choice to do whatever it is that you want without doing the things that stress you out, right? So this definition is not necessarily what we're looking at for leisure. In fact, it's the opposite. And there is a brilliant philosopher. His name is Joseph Pieper. He wrote this wonderful book. Well, it's essays, philosophical essays on leisure, and he put it into a book. It's called Leisure, The Basis of Culture. Highly recommend you read that. It's meaty. It is a philosophical essay book. But he says leisure, it must be clearly understood, is a mental and spiritual attitude. It is not simply the result of external factors. It is not the inevitable result of spare time, a holiday, a weekend, or a vacation. So right there, he's literally taking that other definition and throwing it out. Then he goes on to say, it is in the first place an attitude of the mind, a condition of the soul, and as such, utterly contrary to the ideal of worker in each and every one of the three aspects under which it was analyzed: work as activity, as toil, and as social function. So he's talking about it's not just a void of these things, it is the mental attitude of which we do these things and which we can experience true leisure. Now, here's what I know to be true and why I've always said that leisure is one of those things that really could help marriages. It's a game changer for marriage. I mean, for life in general, but specifically marriage, is because the way we were created. We were created, man and woman, in the image and likeness of God, our Creator. And He is really intentional. He is very intentional. His design is brilliant. And He does everything with a purpose. Everything has a form and a function in which it's meant to really flourish. And so when we look at our lives, we have to go back to creation, to the Creator, to His original plan, so that we can better understand what all this is like. And what He does in the 7 days of creation, He creates for 6 days, and on the seventh day, He rests. He has this time of rest. And let it be known that this time of rest is not for him. He is God. He's not tired. Okay? He's not tired from the work he did, and that's why he needs to rest. The rest is for us. The rest is for our communion with him. That rest is for us in his image and likeness to have that time to connect with him, with our Creator. So if we take that understanding, and yes, we should have a whole day of leisure, of rest in our week, that is a commandment, keep the Lord's Day holy, but taking this from Joseph Pieper and seeing that it's a mental attitude, we can pull it also into the other days of our lives. We can pull it into our work. We can pull it into life at home, right? All of that good stuff. And so when you're looking at leisure that way, it's more so in the pockets of your day because it's a mental attitude, right? You can see things around you and let them inform you of what they are. Leisure is also, he goes on to say in his book, really at the heart of it is contemplation. Now, contemplation is one of those things that kind of seems like a medieval idea and it's kind of outdated. Well, it kind of is outdated because everything in our lives is like 3.6 seconds long these days. And we don't have really that capacity in our brains because of lack of practice to really sit and contemplate something. So it's not that it's not relevant to our lives, it's that we don't do it as often. That is why it might feel unfamiliar. But contemplation is at the heart of leisure. True contemplation, if you were to like follow that word back and really get a good grip at contemplation, true contemplation always leads us back to the Creator. Truly. So whatever we contemplate, whether it is a flower that we see growing in our garden and we sit with it and we contemplate it and we let it tell us what it is. That's what contemplation is. So you look at the thing and instead of saying, oh my gosh, look at this flower. Oh, I mean, it's kind of yellow. I mean, it could have been this a little bit. Maybe the sun hadn't hit it enough. Like we're telling it what it is, but having the flower tell us what it is. If you've ever really contemplated a plant of any sort, you can look at it and just be struck with awe with how much beauty and intentionality that design has, right? You look at a flower and you see little things that you've never noticed before. And you see like just the intricate detail of with which this plant was created. And you can't help but think, oh my goodness, like if God could make this flower so unique and so special and so beautiful, and it's itty bitty baby flower, how amazing is that? And how much more does he have a plan and beauty for our lives, right? This is the flow of contemplation. We see a thing, it tells us what it is, we contemplate that, we are in awe of it, and then we can point it back to our Creator. The same thing goes for conversation. Have you ever had a really good conversation with a friend and you're just like left feeling so connected and just like, wow, I love having conversations with people, right? A lot of times those conversations are full of contemplation, right? So you might be like thinking, oh, how was your day? Yes, good. And then you get to the real stuff, right? And you're like, you know what I've been thinking about lately? I've been thinking about like the present moment and how the present moment is really where life happens. And when we spend too much time thinking about the past or living too much in the future, we miss our time together. And isn't it so cool that like we were made that way? Like not made to live in the past because that would drive us insane with the choices that we've made, or to live in worry of the future, that would also cause us to go insane with just the amount of unknowns, but that we were made to live in the present moment. Like, we only have to handle what's on our plate in this moment. I mean, that's incredible. And it's amazing how we were designed that way, right? It's just like so cool that God designed us that way, and that we can sit here and talk in the present moment. And this is something that we can remember, but also it is so good to be here right now with you. That's an example of true contemplation and true leisure. Conversations can be true leisure. I know for all the women out there, they're like, woohoo, yeah, we knew this from all along, right? But it's true. Now, I want to talk about how we can start to implement this into our lives so that our marriages, our friendships, our lives can just flourish. Okay? So the idea of leisure can sometimes be just that, an idea, because not a lot of people take the time to sit through and be like, okay, well, how do I make this practical? How do I understand what it is so that I can live it out? So that's what we're going to do now, because I really do think that it is so important for everyone's lives, but also in marriage. Now, I want to tell you about something that happens in marriage psychologically to us, okay? So psychologically, our conversation starts to slow once the chase is complete. And what I mean by the chase is boy meets girl, boy pursues girl, boy gets girl, right? So marriage, okay, is oftentimes the end of the chase or cohabitation. But in this stance, we're talking about marriage, okay? So conversation naturally slows based on our psychology. And there's many purposes to this. One, we feel safe. We have made a decision and we can kind of rest in that. And two, it makes space for other things. So when you're dating, you're having a lot of conversation, but when you're married, you have now space instead of that conversation to be doing other things, which is really important. However, we can kind of get stuck in that, and that can lead to a lot of problems. And in fact, you might be nodding your head being like, oh my gosh, I've seen this in people. There's a really good reason why a lot of books, a lot of movies end with the got you moment and happily ever after. It's because they don't want to explain this next part. Okay? So the chase ends. Psychologically, our conversation starts to slow, and that's really good for a purpose, okay, to make space for other things. However, we don't want to let it carry on, because what happens in that case is, well, your conversation is slowing, so you feel a little bit disconnected, okay? Then maybe there's a small misunderstanding, which, because you're not communicating as much, you let fester. And it becomes something bigger. And maybe you have some sort of resentment that starts really small, but you're like, oh no, it's just like a little annoyance that we have to handle, because I've heard that the newlywed stage is hard. Okay, so then you keep going and you're like, you know what? No, this thing is really bothering me. And then you don't bring it up. And then there's resentment that gets built up. And then you don't have conversations about it. And then eventually it gets to such a big point that there's a big argument or something or other, right? We don't want that. What we want instead is to recognize that this is something that happens, to be aware of, to take advantage of the time when it is really good and healthy for us to do that, but also to recognize that we have to get back to that pursuit of one another in order for this to work. One of our deepest desires as human beings is to be seen, known, and loved. And that desire is not for a split second. It's not for the vows at the altar to stand there in front of God and all your friends and to say, I see you, I choose you, I know you, and I love you. That is not what we're dreaming of. That is a moment we're dreaming of, but we want a life full of that. We want to be seen, known, and loved in our daily lives, in the ins and outs of everything, our job, our home life, everything. That's what we want, right? And so we don't want to leave that moment only at the altar. What we want is to have this pursuit throughout the rest of our lives. And it's something that we need to do, but no one talks about it. No one's telling us. And the devil is having a field day with it. The devil is coming in and saying, you're exactly right. You don't need to do anything. You did the thing. You got married. It's time to rest. It's time to take a load off. Put your feet up. You did the wedding planning. You did all that stuff. Why talk about anything now? The devil is having a heyday. Okay? We don't want that. We want to be connecting with our spouse. We want to be pursuing our spouse. And so some of the ways that we can do that is through, you know what I'm going to say, leisure. Leisure. So leisure, as most properly understood as a mental and spiritual kind of level, a disposition, right? An attitude. We want to be able to share that with our spouse. Okay? So that looks like having really intentional conversations with each other. Carving out intentional time to date each other, right? To sit down and be like, what's new? Like, what's going on in your head? Like, let's have a real conversation like we used to when we were dating, right? Or when you were so enamored with one another that you could talk on the phone for 4 hours into the wee hours of the morning just because you needed to know more about them. That is the energy that we're bringing into marriage with this leisure, right? We want to know what they're thinking. We want to know what their experience with leisure is. We want to contemplate the world around us together. So that can look like I said, having conversations, carving out intentional time, going on date nights, taking a walk. That's a really simple, very practical way to do this. When you're having intentional time together, especially no devices. Take the devices out, just put them away, because that can really be a big block, especially in our modern world. Make time for each other, and more importantly, make space for each other. I see this all the time where there are too many things in our heads and we're too consumed with the past or the future that we're not able to hold space for the present moment. And what ends up happening is that we cannot be present with the people in front of us, and we cannot take care of the people and the things that we were tasked to take care of. So we first need to make sure that we have enough time and space for ourselves, for our brains, for our relationship with ourselves, and our relationship with our spouse, to be able to have a space for them, to be able to have real contemplation, to have real conversation, to have real intentional time with each other. And if you feel like, your spouse asks you, hey, like, let's go have a walk, like I'd love to just like chit chat, and you feel like you have too much to do, too much on your plate, that is a really good warning to reevaluate and to say, oh my gosh, you're right. These things are important. These things will need to get done still, and I can do them. But right now I'm going to give the gift of my presence to my spouse. And I'm going to take a 15-minute walk, and we're going to come back and maybe we'll do these chores together. I truly believe that leisure is a huge key to the success of marriages everywhere. And so I hope that this really encouraged you to learn more about leisure, or to start incorporating aspects of leisure into your lives, into your marriage, into your arsenal of tools moving forward. I'm cheering for you.